archetypes in history have those who dare to question the established been punished. Good morning, my name is Elvira, and it is an honor to be on the TEDx stage once again. We live in a society where we depend on several essential elements to live, such as authority, traditions, culture, religion, science, among others. However, we must remember that these institutions rely on the credibility we assign to them, which means that the trust we decide to put on them carries great power. Therefore, what happens when you just accept as so-called fact without questioning? In this talk, we will address dogmatism and the causes of it. The roots of dogmatism lay in the ancient Greece, where it emerged as a philosophical current that embraced the idea that the environment could be understood without the need to question. Thales of Miletus, considered the first philosopher of the West, was a pioneer in dogmatism. For him, water was the principle of everything. This idea, although it may seem simple to us today, was an early attempt to try to explain the world with reason and without resorting to mythological explanations. Our world continues to move forward with this information, especially among young people and those with blind faith, individuals who completely depend on someone or something without the backing of reason, logic, or evidence. Many factors can influence such mental stance. This dependence on filtered realities leads us to a more concerning question. Who benefits from our ignorance? Let's consider what certain institutions truly want for us, what a manipulative and seek, and how can they achieve this by limiting access to information. Without access, people are deprived of the awareness necessary to make informed decisions. As an extreme example, we can use North Korea. The government has strict control over information. Citizens are barred from accessing independent sources, foreign media, or unapproved literature by the government. Every search and result is tracked, monitored, and filtered. The result is a total dependency on the regime, a collapse of critical thinking, and in my opinion, the most dreadful part is isolation. When individuals are fed a single narrative for long enough, they start to depend on it to make sense of their reality. How much of the information we receive is filtered by political or economic interests? Media manipulation is another crucial tool in maintaining dogma. It refers to the deliberate or strategic use of media channels such as television, newspaper, social media, to shape public perception in a way that benefits a specific agenda, often through distortion, omission, or a biased presentation of information. A recent case illustrates this clearly, the public discovery of Rancho Izaguirre. As the saying goes, what is not named remains invisible. The site had already been known. In September of 2024, the authorities raided the ranch and confirmed the presence of organized crime members, who, by the way, and as many times, suspiciously escaped. A body was discovered, prompting a forensic examination, and official reports claimed that neither the three clandestine ovens nor the multiple pairs of shoes belonging to homicide victims were found, or perhaps found but not reported. In March of 2025, however, a group of mothers, not authorities, mothers, located the site. And after the authorities retook the case, they publicly stated that the prosecutors had removed key evidence and cleaned the area. Why the silence? The likely answer lies in political cowardice and complicity between the government and the cartels. Authorities resisted acknowledging what this site represented: hell, a tragedy, and a massacre that reveals the inhumane people we are dealing with, the cartels. Government-affiliated media, with privileged access to the site, by the way, deliberately downplay the crime through omission of key facts. And with 61 votes in favor and 30 votes against, the Senate rejected on March of 2025 the creation of a special commission on the Izaguirre Ranch case, which was used as a training camp for the Jalisco New Generation cartel, with the excuse that the examination of an extermination camp was not urgently needed. Authorities stated that they were startled by the outcome, that now it turns that we are hurt by the situation, when in reality this is all a campaign against the government. That, ladies and gentlemen, is our government. As the saying goes, the one who has nothing to hide has nothing to fear. Adding, from the current government, there has been a quiet and hidden proposal of censorship for platforms, networks, or telecommunications that could contain subversive information. And it grants the government the ability to block and control digital platforms. By centralizing power, violating the right of expression, the previous government has corrupted this country, concentrating most of the power in the executive branch, weakening the democratic institutions, and paving the way for a new government that is evidently finishing to rot it. This brings us to another powerful tool of control, one that shapes not just what we know, but how we perceive: education. How can we trust what we've been taught through history pages if truth itself is often written by those in power? Another important factor is the academic distortion, as it forms the basis of our way of thinking, beliefs, principles. In many cases, content may be distorted, presenting a biased view that victimizes a particular country, and indigenous resistance or colonial violence is often omitted or minimized. It is crucial to question what is presented as the only truth, even when society insists that there's nothing to question, that in reality is a form of constructive skepticism. As an example, we can point out to book burning. During the Argentine dictatorship, a systematic policy of cultural censorship was implemented, which included burning books deemed subversive, like, for example, works by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, ideas allegedly intended to undermine or overthrow systems, authority, or established norms, often in disruptive or rebellious ways. But why is this being silenced? Do you see the controversy over institutions such as the government concerned about the citizens questioning the established? Based on our context, what tells us that we have to follow them as they want? What does it tell you that the people are rising up in every possible way? And the government is trying to suppress that expression because they fear that the people will break free from that brainwash they're being subjected to and finally becoming aware. Studies have shown that, in addition to destroying literary works, educational texts for kids were also burnt. These texts dealing with topics such as human rights, democracy, or social justice. This censorship deeply affected educational and cultural spheres, limiting access to critical information of history and promoting an official, unified vision of reality. We can also recall Shakespeare's authorship and his very existence. Due to the lack of concrete documentation about Shakespeare's life in the context of his era, he could not have been the true author of his works. The theory talks about the possibility that a more educated figure such as Christopher Marlowe or Francis Bacon could have been the true author of these works, thus faking his death officially reported in 1593. Adding, his tomb has an inscription related to a curse, and supposedly this is the reason why it has never been opened. And it is clearly a very good strategy to use fear to maintain a narrative. Psychologist Cassiopo mentions that fear itself holds great power because it enables the limbic system, which one is related to emotions, and blocks the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible of making conscious decisions. That's why making a decision out of fear or other emotional response is never a good idea. Besides, in many history books from Western countries, the French Revolution is presented as a valiant struggle for the ideals of freedom and justice. But the massive violence that occurred during the Reign of Terror are often omitted or minimized. French revolutionaries are portrayed as valiant, fighting for freedom and human rights, without mentioning the violence done in the name of their revolution, such as the massacres of their opponents and the mass decapitation of people under the Suspects Law, which one allowed the rebels to kill anyone that was opposing to their radical ideas. So they wanted human rights while violating others. It is a pity that history tends to repeat itself because its darkest chapters are erased and its most uncomfortable stories are often modified, as we can exemplify in the United States. President Trump's latest executive order aimed at eliminating so-called divisive or anti-American content from the Smithsonian Institution exemplifies a far-reaching effort to manipulate the cultural fabric and rewrite the history of an entire nation. The current president has made an order to basically rewrite history. But as I made quote Rebecca Yarros, there is nothing more sacred than the archives. Even temples can be rebuilt, but books cannot be rewritten. History cannot be rewritten. Can a placement to nurture also teach us not to question? Dogmatism can be found in other areas, even in our families. Without intending to cast a negative light over this institution, we must acknowledge its relation to the topic. A phrase as common as "because I said so" perfectly reflects the essence of dogmatism. These type of statements convey that there is no logical reason behind a decision, only the imposition of authority without the need for justification. Or religion, while acknowledging that, according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to belong to a religion of their choice. However, they should also have the right to question that affiliation. The ability to maintain a firm and reflective stance towards this institution is essential, just as it is essential not to fully delegate all of trust on a belief system. As an example, we have the case of Galileo Galilei. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church suppressed the scientific progress through the concept of dogma. This physicist was persecuted for claiming that the earth revolved around the sun. contradicting the biblical teachings accepted at that time. Friedrich Nietzsche said that convictions are more dangerous than lies, because when a belief cannot be contested, it becomes a mental prison, where faith is no longer faith, but fear. As in the edge of a dagger, there's danger in dogmatism. There's hazard because we become amenable. We become tools for others, pawns in the chessboard of the system in which we are subjected to since we are born, to society, institutions, a systematic routine. But we must resist, because without critical thinking, there's no freedom. Those who don't question obey without knowing to whom or what they serve. Do you know when our system starts to tremble? When we begin to question reality and why, from the moment we are born, we become part of a system of predefined social norms, a system, a framework, a mechanism that we just accept because that's the right thing, because we were taught that that's the right thing. But these systems or institutions begin to be terrified when we citizens realize that we are the only ones capable of giving legitimacy to their power through our obedience and compliance. Accepting a so-called fact without questioning is the surest path to manipulation. When we passively adopt a narrative, we relinquish accountability. We delegate responsibility because that's comfortable. We allow others to think for us, speak for us, decide for us. But in a society where institutions often benefit from our silence and our compliance, critical thinking is not just a personal tool, but a civic duty. It is up to us to demand transparency, seek evidence, to challenge what is presented as the only truth, and never settle for the comfort of the unquestionable. Only when we start to question our obedience towards society, society itself starts to fear. We must resist the comfort in conformity, even when accepting a narrative might provide us a false sense of security and a promise. Because conformity is not peace, it's a dead end, and it's the principal enemy of evolution. Real progress begins the moment we dare to ask why. And only by questioning can we begin to change the world around us. Will you continue to blindly comply, or will you speak up for what you think and believe to drive real change? Thanks for your time.